15-year-old me stood alone at Denver International Airport, watching my mother Sarah walk away with her new husband David and his two children, Ashley and Brandon, toward the gate for their Bahamas vacation. When I called after her asking what I should do, she turned around, shrugged coldly, and said, "You can figure it out." Security approached as crowds moved around me, my boarding pass confiscated, luggage already on the plane. The devastating realization hit that my own mother had deliberately abandoned me 3,000 miles from home. Looking back now, I can see how everything started to unravel 6 months before that terrible day at the airport. My name is Kieran, and I need to tell you about the woman who was supposed to protect me but instead chose to destroy me for money and status. Before David entered our lives, Mom and I had something special. Sure, we struggled financially after my father Robert left when I was 8, but we were a team. Mom worked double shifts as a hospital nurse at Presbyterian St. Joseph in Denver, coming home exhausted but always making time to help with my homework or watch a movie together on her nights off. Our small apartment near Highlands was cramped, but it felt like home because we had each other. She would tell me stories about her shifts, about the patients who made her laugh and the ones who broke her heart. I admired her dedication, the way she fought for her patients, and never gave up on anyone. That's the mother I remember, the one who would stay up until 2 in the morning helping me with my science fair project even though she had to work at 6. Everything changed when David entered the picture at a hospital fundraiser in March. David was a successful real estate developer who had recently divorced his wife and gained custody of his 2 children, Ashley and Brandon. He drove a black Mercedes, wore expensive suits, and owned a massive house in Cherry Hills Village, one of Denver's most exclusive neighborhoods. At first, Mom's excitement about David seemed normal. She would come home glowing after their dates, telling me about the fancy restaurants he took her to and the thoughtful gifts he bought. She started buying new clothes, getting her hair done professionally, and wearing makeup even on her days off. I was happy for her because she deserved someone who treated her well after all those years of struggling alone. But then subtle changes began. Mom started making comments about our lifestyle, things she had never mentioned before. She complained about our apartment being too small and embarrassing. She criticized our secondhand furniture and the fact that I wore clothes from discount stores. These were things that had never bothered her when we were just the 2 of us. When David's children started staying with us on weekends, the dynamic in our home shifted completely. Ashley was 16, a year older than me, with perfectly straightened blonde hair and an attitude that made it clear she considered our apartment beneath her standards. She would wrinkle her nose at our small television and ask Mom why we didn't have a bigger kitchen like normal people. Brandon was 14 but acted younger, constantly demanding attention and throwing tantrums when he didn't get his way. He would deliberately break my things and then cry to Mom about how mean I was being to him. Instead of defending me, Mom would scold me for not being more welcoming to our guests. The breaking point came when I discovered the bank statements hidden in Mom's bedroom closet. I had gone in looking for extra blankets for Ashley and Brandon, who were staying the weekend again, when I knocked over a shoebox from the top shelf. Papers scattered everywhere, and as I gathered them up, the numbers on the bank statements caught my eye. My mother had been lying to me about our financial situation. We weren't as broke as she had led me to believe. The statements showed she had over $8,000 in savings, money she had been accumulating from her nursing shifts for years. But more shocking were the deposit slips, showing expensive gifts from David that she had returned for cash, items worth hundreds of dollars that she had told me were too generous to accept. She had been playing poor to manipulate David's sympathy while secretly building a nest egg. All those times she told me we couldn't afford new clothes for school, or that she was too tired to cook because money was tight. She had been lying. She had been accepting David's financial help under false pretenses, making him believe she was a struggling single mother, barely making ends meet. When I confronted her that evening after Ashley and Brandon had gone home, her reaction shocked me more than the discovery itself. Instead of explaining or apologizing, she became furious. Her face turned red, and she grabbed the statements from my hands. "How dare you go through my private things?" she hissed, her voice shaking with rage. "You have no right to question how I handle our finances." "But Mom, you lied," I said, my 15-year-old voice cracking with confusion and hurt. "You told David we were broke, And you made me feel guilty about needing new shoes when you had thousands of dollars. You are so ungrateful, Kieran, she snapped back, pacing around our small living room like a caged animal. Everything I do is for our future, for our family. David is offering us a chance at a better life, and all you can do is criticize and snoop around like some kind of detective. What about our life now? I asked desperately. What about just the two of us? Wasn't that enough? The look she gave me then was one I'll never forget. It was cold, calculating, and completely foreign from the mother who used to tuck me in at night and tell me I was her whole world. No, Kieran, she said quietly, her voice steady now. It wasn't enough. It was never going to be enough. That night, I lay awake in my small bedroom, listening to her make phone calls to David, her voice sweet and loving as she told him how much she missed him. I realized that my mother had been acting for months, playing a role designed to secure her future with this wealthy man and his children. And somehow, I had become the obstacle standing in the way of her new life. The week after our confrontation, David moved into our apartment permanently, bringing Ashley and Brandon with him. What Mom called blending our families felt more like a hostile takeover of my home and my relationship with my mother. David was smooth and charming on the surface, but I quickly noticed how he operated. He would make seemingly innocent comments about my clothes being a little worn, or suggest that I might be more comfortable eating dinner in my room when they had adult conversations. He never directly criticized me, but his messages were clear. I didn't fit into the new family structure he was building. Mom transformed into someone I barely recognized. She began openly favoring Ashley and Brandon, buying them expensive clothes from department stores while continuing to shop for me at thrift stores and discount chains. When I pointed out this disparity, she explained that David provided an allowance for his children's needs, as if that justified treating me like a second-class citizen in my own home. Ashley took advantage of this new dynamic immediately. She would accidentally ruin my homework by spilling drinks on it, then apologize sweetly to Mom while I scrambled to redo hours of work. She convinced Mom to let her redecorate the living room, removing all the photos of Mom and me together and replacing them with expensive art pieces that David bought. Don't you think this looks more sophisticated? Ashley would say, running her manicured fingers over a abstract painting that cost more than Mom's monthly salary. It's so much more grown-up than those old family photos. Mom would beam at Ashley's suggestions, praising her mature taste and eye for design. Meanwhile, my own suggestions for family activities or simple requests for Mom's attention were dismissed as childish or inappropriate timing. Brandon was equally manipulative, but in a different way. He would deliberately break my possessions and then run crying to Mom about how Kieran yelled at me when I confronted him. When I came home from school to find my baseball cards scattered and torn, Brandon claimed he was just looking, and that I had scared him when I found the mess. Kieran, you need to be more patient with Brandon. Mom scolded me while comforting the crocodile tears of a kid who was only a year younger than me. He's adjusting to a new living situation, and you're supposed to be the big brother figure. The big brother figure who was forced to give up his bedroom so Ashley could have her own space. I moved into what used to be Mom's home office, sleeping on a fold-out couch while Ashley redecorated my former room with expensive furniture that David purchased. When I complained about the unfairness, Mom told me I was being selfish and needed to learn to share. My grades began suffering because I was constantly responsible for watching Ashley and Brandon while Mom and David went on their frequent date nights. They would leave at 6 in the evening and return after midnight, expecting me to make sure the kids did their homework, ate dinner, and got to bed on time. Ashley would deliberately stay up late watching television, knowing I couldn't physically force her to go to bed, then tell Mom the next morning that I had been bossy and mean. Maybe Kieran isn't ready for this much responsibility, David would say with false concern, his hand resting possessively on Mom's shoulder. Some kids take longer to mature than others. The breaking point came when I discovered the real financial arrangement between Mom and David. I had been looking for a phone charger in Mom's purse when I found a bank deposit slip that made my stomach turn. David had been giving Mom $3,000 per month as what the deposit slip labeled household integration allowance. My mother was being paid to be a stepmother to Ashley and Brandon. She was receiving more money per month than she made working full-time as a nurse, money that was specifically designated for taking care of David's children while her own son got nothing. That evening, I waited until Ashley and Brandon were in their rooms before confronting Mom again. She was in the kitchen making an elaborate dinner for David, using expensive ingredients she had never bought when it was just the two of us. "Mom, I found the deposit slip," I said quietly, not wanting to cause a scene with David in the next room. She didn't even look up from the stove. "I don't know what you're talking about, Kieran. The $3,000 David gives you every month. The household integration allowance." This time she did turn around, but her expression wasn't surprised or guilty. It was annoyed, like I was a persistent mosquito she needed to swat away. "That money is for household expenses," she said calmly, stirring the sauce with practiced indifference. "David wants to make sure his children are comfortable and well cared for." "What about me, Mom? What about your actual son being comfortable and well cared for?" "You are comfortable and well cared for, Kieran. You have a roof over your head, food to eat, and clothes to wear. Some children aren't as fortunate." Her words hit me like a physical blow. She was talking about me like I was a charity case, a burden she was graciously tolerating rather than her own child. Later that night, I couldn't sleep on my uncomfortable fold-out couch, so I went to the kitchen for some water. I could hear Mom and David talking quietly in their bedroom, and their door was slightly open. I know I shouldn't have listened, but something compelled me to hear what they said when they thought I wasn't around. "The transition has been smoother than I expected," David was saying. "Ashley and Brandon have adjusted remarkably well." "They're such good kids," Mom replied, her voice warm with affection. "Ashley has such sophisticated taste, and Brandon is so sweet and sensitive." "What about the Kieran situation?" David asked. "I know we discussed this before, but I'm still concerned about the dynamics." There was a pause, and when Mom spoke again, her voice was different, colder, more calculating. "I've been thinking about that," she said. "Maybe it's time we considered other options. Boarding school, perhaps. Or maybe he could spend more time with friends' families." "That might be for the best," David agreed. 3 kids are a lot to manage, especially when one of them is resistant to the new family structure. "Kieran has always been difficult," Mom said, and those words broke something inside me that has never fully healed. Even as a little boy, he was jealous and demanding. "I think some distance might be good for everyone." I crept back to my fold-out couch in the converted office, pulling the thin blanket over my head to muffle the sound of my crying. My mother, the woman who used to tell me I was her whole world, was planning to get rid of me so she could focus on her new family and the money that came with it. The next morning, Mom announced cheerfully that we were going to take a wonderful family vacation to the Bahamas during spring break. Ashley and Brandon squealed with excitement, already making plans about snorkeling and beach activities. I assumed I was included, until I noticed Mom making very specific references to the 4 of us, and talking about booking 2 hotel rooms. When I asked directly if I was going, Mom's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered. "Of course you're coming, sweetie," she said, but something in her tone made my blood run cold. "It's going to be a perfect family vacation." But as I watched her interact with Ashley and Brandon over the following weeks, planning activities and shopping for vacation clothes that somehow never included me, I began to understand that my mother's definition of family had changed, and I was no longer part of it. The weeks leading up to the Bahamas trip became an elaborate theatrical performance, with Mom as the star actress and me as the unwitting audience. She would talk excitedly about our family vacation, while consistently excluding me from every actual planning conversation. David found this amazing resort. Mom would gush to Ashley and Brandon over breakfast. "It has a kids club and water slides and even a private beach where we can have dinner reservations." Ashley would bounce in her chair with excitement, already planning her vacation wardrobe, while Brandon peppered them with questions about snorkeling equipment and boat tours. I would sit there eating my cereal, waiting for someone to acknowledge my presence or ask what I wanted to do in the Bahamas. "Kieran will love the water sports," Mom would add as an afterthought, but she never asked me about my interests or included me in any of the detailed discussions about activities and reservations. 2 weeks before the trip, Mom made a big show of presenting everyone with their travel documents. Ashley and Brandon received glossy brochures about the resort, printed itineraries with day-by-day activity plans, and boarding passes in protective sleeves. When Mom handed me my boarding pass, something immediately felt wrong. The paper quality was different from the others, slightly thicker and with a different font. The airline logo looked correct, but the colors seemed slightly off. Most importantly, while Ashley and Brandon's boarding passes had seat assignments like 12A and 12B, mine just had a placeholder that said TBD. "Mom, what does TBD mean on my boarding pass?" I asked, studying the document more carefully. "To be determined," she said without looking up from her coffee. "Sometimes they assign seats at the gate, especially for family groups, but Ashley's boarding pass clearly showed her seat assignment, and when I looked closer at the details, I noticed other discrepancies. The departure time on my pass was 30 minutes later than theirs, and the confirmation number format was completely different. When I pointed this out, Mom became flustered and annoyed. "Airlines make mistakes all the time, Kieran. We'll sort it out at the airport. Stop being so paranoid about everything." The night before our departure, Mom insisted that we all pack light because the resort has everything we need. But I noticed that Ashley packed 2 large suitcases full of new vacation clothes that David had bought her, while Mom suggested I bring just a small backpack to make traveling easier. "Don't worry about bringing too much," Mom said as she watched me reluctantly pack a few t-shirts and shorts. "We can buy anything you need down there." But I had learned not to trust Mom's promises, and I secretly packed a larger bag with more clothes and personal items. I hid it in my bedroom closet, planning to grab it on our way out to the airport. The morning of departure, Mom woke us up at 5 a.m. for our 8:30 flight. She was unusually energetic and cheerful, making a big breakfast and taking photos of everyone getting ready. David loaded the car with multiple suitcases, while Ashley and Brandon chattered excitedly about their upcoming adventure. "Kieran, honey, can you help me carry some things to the car?" Mom asked sweetly. "We need to make sure we don't forget anything important." As I grabbed my hidden bag from the closet, Mom appeared in my doorway with a strange expression on her face. "What's that big bag for?" she asked, her voice sharp. "I told you to pack light." "I just wanted to bring a few extra things," I said defensively. "Ashley brought 2 huge suitcases." "Ashley's situation is different," Mom replied curtly. "Leave the big bag here. You can use the small backpack like we discussed." Something about her tone made me deeply uncomfortable, but I was afraid to argue and risk being left behind entirely. I reluctantly left my larger bag and grabbed just the small backpack she had suggested. At the airport, Mom orchestrated our arrival with military precision. She sent me to get coffee for everyone while she, David, Ashley, and Brandon handled the check-in process. When I returned with 4 cups of coffee, I found them already at the gate area, boarding passes in hand, looking ready to depart. "Perfect timing," Mom said brightly, taking her coffee. "We're boarding in just a few minutes. Can I see my boarding pass again?" I asked, that familiar knot of anxiety growing in my stomach. "I want to double-check my seat assignment." Mom handed me the same questionable document I had received weeks earlier. As I examined it more closely, a woman in an airport security uniform approached our group. "Excuse me," the security officer said politely. "I need to verify some travel documents." She looked at Ashley and Brandon's boarding passes first, scanning them with a handheld device that beeped approvingly. David's pass also scanned without issue, but when she scanned my boarding pass, the device made a different sound, a harsh buzzing that made everyone in the gate area look over. "Sir, I'm going to need you to come with me," the security officer said, her tone becoming more serious. "There seems to be an issue with your travel documents." "What kind of issue?" I asked, my voice cracking with panic. "This boarding pass appears to be fraudulent," she explained, examining the document more carefully. "The confirmation number doesn't match our system, and the document format is inconsistent with current airline standards." The world seemed to stop spinning around me. I looked at Mom, expecting her to explain the confusion, to fix the problem, to protect me like mothers are supposed to do. Instead, she stood up, gathered her purse, and began walking toward the boarding gate with David, Ashley, and Brandon. "Mom!" I called after her, my voice echoing through the terminal. "Mom, wait!" She turned around one final time, and the look on her face was one of cold indifference that will haunt me for the rest of my life. She shrugged her shoulders in a gesture that conveyed complete dismissal of my existence. "You can figure it out," she said simply, then turned and walked down the jetway with her new family, leaving me standing there with airport security and a fraudulent boarding pass. I watched through the terminal window as their plane taxied away from the gate, carrying my mother and the life I thought we had built together toward a tropical paradise where I was never meant to belong. The security officer was asking me questions about who had given me the fake documents, but her voice seemed to come from very far away. At 15 years old, I had been deliberately abandoned by my own mother, 3,000 miles from home, with no money, no phone, and no way to get back to Denver. As the reality of my situation sank in, I understood that this hadn't been a mistake or a misunderstanding. It had been a carefully planned abandonment, designed to remove me from my mother's new life while she enjoyed a luxury vacation with the family that mattered to her now. The boarding pass had been fake all along. Mom had never intended to take me to the Bahamas. She had brought me to the airport for one reason only: to abandon me as far from home as possible while she started her new life without the burden of her actual son. Airport security released me after determining that I was a victim rather than a perpetrator of the fraudulent boarding pass scheme. But their sympathy didn't solve my immediate problem. I was completely alone in Orlando International Airport with no money, no phone, and no way to get home to Denver. The first night was the worst. I tried to stay inconspicuous, moving between different terminal areas to avoid drawing attention from security guards who might ask questions I couldn't answer. The airport never fully closes, but most of the shops and restaurants shut down after midnight, leaving me to sleep on uncomfortable metal chairs, surrounded by the sounds of cleaning crews and late-night flight announcements. I survived on free samples from food court vendors during the day and crackers from the occasional sympathetic traveler. My small backpack contained 2 changes of clothes and about $12 in cash, money I had been saving from odd jobs around our neighborhood. It wouldn't even buy me a decent meal, let alone a plane ticket home. On my second day of homelessness, I met Frank Rodriguez, a night shift janitor who worked the terminal cleaning crew. Frank was probably 60 years old, with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades of honest work. He noticed me sitting in the same area for hours, clearly not a normal passenger waiting for a flight. "You okay, kid?" Frank asked quietly, emptying trash cans near where I was sitting. "You've been here a while." I was too embarrassed to tell him the whole truth, so I made up a story about missing my flight and waiting for my family to send money for a new ticket. Frank nodded sympathetically, but didn't pry for details. "Airport's not a good place to spend the night," he said matter-of-factly. "Security gets suspicious, and some folks around here aren't as friendly as they seem." Over the next few days, Frank became my lifeline. He would slip me leftover sandwiches from the employee break room and warn me when security supervisors were doing their rounds. Most importantly, he let me use the staff phone in his cleaning supply closet, the first real communication access I had since being abandoned. "You got family you can call?" Frank asked one evening as he unlocked the closet door for me. "Somebody who can help you get home?" That question forced me to confront the reality I had been avoiding for 4 days. Mom was unreachable, probably relaxing on a beach in the Bahamas, without giving me a second thought. I had no other relatives in Denver, and my few friends were just 15-year-old kids who couldn't possibly help with something this serious. But there was one person I hadn't considered, someone I had been trained to think of as the villain in my life story: my father, Robert. I hadn't spoken to my father since I was 8 years old, and everything I knew about him came from Mom's version of events. According to her, Robert had abandoned us when he couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father. She painted him as selfish, unreliable, and completely uninterested in maintaining a relationship with his son. "He never calls, never writes, never even asks about you," Mom used to say when I was younger, and would ask about my dad. "Some men just aren't built to be fathers, Kieran. It's better this way." But sitting in that airport storage closet with Frank's sympathetic eyes watching me, I began to question Mom's narrative. If she could lie so elaborately about our finances, about the vacation, about everything else, maybe she had lied about Robert too. I still remembered his phone number from when I was little, before Mom changed ours and told me we were starting fresh. My 8-year-old brain had memorized those 10 digits like a lifeline, and somehow they had stayed with me through all these years. With shaking fingers, I dialed the number, half expecting it to be disconnected or belong to someone else entirely. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. "Morrison Aviation. This is Jennifer speaking. Morrison. That was my father's last name. My last name. My heart started pounding as I realized this might actually be him. Hi, I stammered, suddenly unsure of what to say. I'm looking for Robert Morrison. May I ask who's calling? Jennifer's voice was professional but warm. This is Kieran, I said, then added quietly. Kieran Morrison. His son. The silence on the other end of the line lasted so long that I thought she might have hung up. When Jennifer finally spoke again, her voice was completely different, filled with emotion I couldn't identify. Oh my God, she whispered. Kieran? Robert's Kieran? Hold on, honey, don't hang up. Let me get him right now. I could hear her calling out urgently in the background, her voice echoing through what sounded like a large building. Robert! Robert, come quick! It's Kieran on the phone! Heavy footsteps approached, and then a man's voice came on the line. A voice I barely remembered but that somehow felt familiar in my bones. Kieran? Is that really you? Hi, Dad, I managed to say, and those two words opened a floodgate of emotions I had been suppressing for 7 years. Son, where are you? Are you okay? I've been trying to reach you for years, but your mother... His voice trailed off, and I could hear him taking deep breaths to compose himself. I'm in Orlando, I said, and then everything came pouring out. The abandonment at the airport, the fake boarding pass, Mom's new family, the $3,000 monthly payments, all of it tumbling out in a desperate rush of words. Robert listened without interrupting, and when I finished, the silence stretched for several seconds before he spoke again. Kieran, I want you to listen to me very carefully, he said, his voice steady but intense. None of this is your fault. What your mother did is criminal, and I'm going to fix this right now. I don't have any money for a plane ticket, I said, wiping my nose on my sleeve. I don't know how to get home. You're not going home to Denver, Robert said firmly. You're coming home to me, to your real home. I'm coming to get you personally, but I'm in Florida, and I don't even know where you live now. I live in San Diego, and I own an aviation company. I'll be there in 4 hours. The confidence in his voice was something I hadn't experienced in months of living with Mom's uncertainty and manipulation. Here was a man who heard his son was in trouble and immediately took action to fix it. Dad? I said, the word feeling strange but right on my tongue. Why haven't I heard from you all these years? Mom said you didn't want to see me. Robert's voice became heavy with pain and anger. Son, I have sent you birthday cards and Christmas presents every year since the divorce. I have tried to call, tried to visit, tried to maintain joint custody. Your mother blocked every attempt and told the courts you didn't want to see me. My world shifted on its axis as I realized the depth of Mom's deception. She hadn't just stolen money and abandoned me at an airport. She had stolen 7 years of my relationship with my father, making us both believe the other didn't care. I have boxes of returned letters and gifts in my office, Robert continued, his voice thick with emotion. Every birthday, every Christmas, every Father's Day, I've wondered if my son was thinking about me. Now I know you couldn't think about me because you didn't know I was trying. Jennifer came back on the line. Kieran, honey, we're going to take care of everything. Your dad is getting the plane ready right now. Is there somewhere safe you can wait for us? I looked at Frank, who had been pretending not to listen but was clearly concerned about my situation. He nodded encouragingly when I made eye contact. Yes, I told Jennifer. I have someone here helping me. A really good man named Frank. Put Frank on the phone. Robert's voice came back on the line. Frank took the phone nervously, but as he talked to my father, I watched his expression change from concern to respect to genuine warmth. They spoke for several minutes, with Frank providing details about airport security procedures and the best place for a private aircraft to meet us. When Frank handed the phone back to me, Robert's voice was confident and reassuring. Kieran, I want you to know something important. You're not just my son. You're my priority. You have a little sister named Emma, who asks about her big brother all the time, and a stepmother who has been hoping to meet you for years. We're not just picking you up. We're bringing you home. As I hung up that phone in Frank's storage closet, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before David moved in. Hope. My father was coming to rescue me, and for the first time in months, I felt like someone actually wanted me around. But more than that, I was beginning to understand that everything Mom had told me about my past, about my father, about our family, had been lies designed to serve her own interests. The woman who abandoned me at an airport had been manipulating my entire life, and I was finally going to learn the truth. Frank helped me clean up and gave me a clean t-shirt from the Lost and Found. "Your dad sounds like a good man," he said as we walked toward the private aviation terminal. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us let us down, but it sounds like you're about to find out what real family feels like." As we waited for Robert's plane to arrive, I thought about Mom enjoying her luxury vacation in the Bahamas, probably not giving me a single thought. She had calculated that I would find a way to survive, that I would somehow make it back to Denver and be waiting there when she returned from her trip. She had no idea that her abandonment had reconnected me with the father she had stolen from me, or that her cruelty was about to backfire in ways she never could have imagined. The best thing Mom ever did for me was abandoning me at that airport, because it forced me to reach out to the one person who had been fighting for me all along. 4 hours later, I watched a sleek white Cessna Citation taxi up to Orlando's private aviation terminal, and my heart nearly stopped when I saw Morrison Aviation painted in elegant blue letters along the fuselage. My father wasn't just coming to rescue me. He was arriving in his own aircraft, representing a level of success and stability that completely contradicted everything Mom had told me about him. Robert Morrison stepped out of that plane, looking nothing like the irresponsible deadbeat father Mom had described. He was tall and confident, wearing a crisp white pilot's shirt and moving with the purposeful stride of a man accustomed to solving problems. When he saw me through the terminal window, his face broke into a smile that was equal parts joy and heartbreak. Our reunion was awkward at first, because 7 years is a long time in the life of a child. But when Robert wrapped me in a hug that lasted nearly a full minute, something broken inside me began to heal. He smelled like leather and aviation fuel, and a cologne I vaguely remembered from childhood, and for the first time since David moved in, I felt completely safe. "You've gotten so tall," he said, holding me at arm's length and studying my face with eyes that were exactly like mine. "You look just like your grandfather Morrison. Strong jaw, determined eyes." Jennifer turned out to be Robert's wife, a kind woman with auburn hair and laugh lines around her eyes, who immediately treated me like family rather than an unexpected complication. She had brought sandwiches and snacks for the flight, anticipating that I might be hungry after days of surviving on airport scraps. "Your dad has talked about you every single day since I've known him," Jennifer said as we settled into the comfortable leather seats of the Citation. "He has pictures of you at every age displayed in his office, even though most of them came from school directories and social media." The flight from Orlando to San Diego gave me nearly 4 hours to learn about the father Mom had systematically erased from my life. Robert owned Morrison Aviation, a successful charter service that specialized in corporate flights and emergency transport. He employed 8 pilots and maintained a fleet of 4 aircraft, building the company from nothing over the past decade. "After the divorce, I threw myself into work," Robert explained as we cruised over Texas at 35,000 feet. "I figured if I could build something successful, maybe eventually I could provide you with opportunities your mother couldn't. I never stopped believing that someday you'd be part of my life again." But the most devastating revelation came when Robert opened his briefcase and showed me 7 years' worth of returned mail. Birthday cards, Christmas presents, graduation gifts, letters expressing his love and hope that we could reconnect. Every single piece of correspondence had been returned with "refused" stamped across the address in Mom's distinctive handwriting. "I sent you a baseball glove for your 10th birthday, Robert said, his voice heavy with suppressed emotion. "A really nice Wilson. A 2000, the same model I used when I played in college. It came back 3 weeks later with a note saying you were not interested in sports." I stared at the returned package, remembering how desperately I had wanted to play Little League that year, and how Mom said we couldn't afford the equipment. She had refused a gift that would have solved that problem, then made me feel guilty for wanting something she claimed we couldn't afford. "I sent you a computer for your 13th birthday, Robert continued, showing me another returned package. Top of the line, perfect for schoolwork and staying in touch. The return note said, "You already had everything you needed." That computer would have changed my life. I had been struggling with schoolwork on our old, slow laptop that crashed constantly, but Mom insisted we couldn't afford to upgrade. Meanwhile, she was accepting $3,000 per month from David while refusing gifts that could have helped her actual son succeed. Jennifer handed me a photo album that made my throat tighten with emotion. It was filled with pictures of Robert at various events and milestones, always with an empty space beside him and a caption like Kieran's graduation or Kieran's 16th birthday with arrows pointing to where I should have been standing. "We celebrated your birthday every year," Jennifer said softly. "Robert would make a cake, and we'd talk about what you might be doing, what you might be interested in, what kind of young man you were becoming." The photo that broke me completely showed Robert standing next to a beautiful 12-year-old girl with his same dark hair and determined expression. They were both wearing matching t-shirts that said Emma's big brother lives in Colorado with a heart and an arrow. "That's your sister Emma," Robert said, watching my face carefully. "She's been asking about you since she could talk. She knows she has a big brother named Kieran, and she's been saving up her allowance money to buy you a Christmas present even though she's never met you." I learned that Robert had been paying child support religiously for 7 years, never missing a payment despite having no contact with me. But more shocking was his revelation that he had been sending additional money specifically designated for my activities, education, and enrichment. The court order required $2,000 per month in basic support, Robert explained, showing me bank records on his phone. "But I sent an extra $500 every month for your sports, music lessons, summer camps, whatever you might be interested in. Your mother cashed every check." I did the math quickly in my head. Over 7 years, Mom had received almost $50,000 specifically intended for my enrichment and activities. Money that could have paid for every sport, every instrument, every camp, every opportunity I had ever wanted but been told we couldn't afford. "What did she tell you about the support payments?" Robert asked. "She said you never paid anything," I admitted, feeling stupid for believing her lies. "She said you disappeared after the divorce and never contributed to my upbringing." Robert's jaw tightened with controlled anger. "I have 7 years of canceled checks and bank records proving otherwise. I also have documentation of every attempt I made to establish joint custody or even basic visitation rights." He showed me thick folders filled with legal documents, court filings, and correspondence with attorneys. Mom had fought every single attempt Robert made to see me, claiming that contact with him would be emotionally damaging and that I had expressed no interest in maintaining a relationship. "The courts generally favor mothers in custody disputes," Robert explained. "When your mother claimed you were afraid of me or didn't want to see me, they took her word for it. I hired 3 different attorneys over the years, but without your direct testimony that you wanted contact, there wasn't much they could do." As we began our descent into San Diego, I felt like I was entering a completely different world. Below us, I could see a beautiful coastal city with palm trees and sparkling water, a place that looked like paradise compared to the cold dysfunction I had left behind in Denver. "Kieran," Robert said as we prepared to land, "I want you to know that coming to live with us isn't charity or obligation. You're my son, and you've always had a place in this family. Jennifer and Emma and I, we're not complete without you." Landing at Montgomery Gibbs Executive Airport, I saw Emma waiting by the fence with a handmade sign that said "Welcome home, Big Brother Kieran," decorated with glitter and stickers. She was jumping up and down with excitement, her dark hair bouncing as she waved frantically at our approaching plane. As we taxied to the terminal, Robert put his hand on my shoulder and looked me directly in the eyes. "Son, what your mother did to you, to us, was unconscionable. But it's over now. You're home, and we're going to make sure she never hurts you again." I didn't understand what he meant by that last part, but I was about to learn that Robert Morrison wasn't just a successful businessman and loving father. He was also someone who had been planning for this reunion for 7 years, and he had documentation that was about to turn my abandonment into my mother's worst nightmare. While Mom was enjoying her luxury vacation in the Bahamas, Robert was orchestrating the most thorough legal dismantling I've ever witnessed. Within 24 hours of my rescue, he had activated a comprehensive legal strategy that he had been preparing for years, just waiting for the right moment to strike. "I've been building this case since the divorce," Robert explained as we sat in his attorney's office the morning after my arrival. "Every returned letter, every refused gift, every blocked phone call, every violation of my parental rights. I documented everything. Robert's attorney, Patricia Williams, was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in parental alienation cases. She laid out a timeline of evidence that painted a devastating picture of Mom's systematic campaign to erase Robert from my life. What your mother did constitutes several criminal offenses, Patricia explained to me. Child endangerment for abandoning a minor in another state, fraud for the fake boarding pass, theft for misappropriating child support funds, and parental alienation for deliberately interfering with your father's custody rights. But Robert wasn't just pursuing criminal charges. He had also filed for emergency custody modification, retroactive support restitution, and civil damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The legal papers were being served to Mom's house the same day she was scheduled to return from her vacation. She's going to walk into the house expecting to find you waiting desperately for her return, Robert said with grim satisfaction. Instead, she's going to find legal documents that will change her life forever. Meanwhile, I was experiencing what real family felt like for the first time in years. Emma was everything Robert had described, a bright and loving 12-year-old who had been excited about having a big brother her entire life. She showed me the room they had prepared for me, complete with a new computer, sports equipment, and shelves ready for whatever books or collections I might want to display. Mom and Dad said you might want to redecorate however you like, Emma said, bouncing on the twin bed they had set up. This is just the starter stuff until you can pick out what you really want. Jennifer had enrolled me in a nearby high school for the following week, already obtaining my transcripts and ensuring I wouldn't miss any important coursework. She treated my integration into the family like a logistical challenge to be solved, rather than an imposition to be endured. Robert's been planning for this day for years, Jennifer told me, as she showed me around their beautiful home in Rancho Bernardo. He never doubted that someday you'd be here with us. The house itself was a revelation. A spacious modern home with a swimming pool, 3-car garage, and a home office where Robert displayed photos of me at every age. Seeing those pictures, some of which I remembered taking, and others that must have come from school directories or social media, I realized that my father had been watching over me from a distance my entire life. On the third day after my arrival, Patricia Williams called with an update that made Robert's face light up with vindictive pleasure. Sarah just returned from her vacation, Patricia reported. She found the legal documents and has been calling our office frantically for the past 2 hours. She wants to negotiate. No negotiations, Robert said firmly. She had 7 years to do the right thing. Now we do this the legal way. But Mom wasn't done with her manipulations. That evening, she somehow obtained Robert's phone number and called directly, demanding to speak with me. Robert put the call on speaker so his attorney could hear everything Mom said. Kieran, sweetie, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. Mom's voice came through the speaker, saccharine, sweet, and desperately fake. I never meant for you to be left at the airport. There was a mix-up with the travel agent, and I've been worried sick about you. That's interesting, Sarah, Robert interjected, his voice ice-cold. Because we have security footage from Orlando International, showing you deliberately walking away from Kieran after security identified the fraudulent boarding pass. The silence on Mom's end lasted for nearly 10 seconds before she switched tactics. You're filling his head with lies, she said, her voice becoming shrill. Kieran belongs with his mother. You can't just steal him away because you have money now. I'm not stealing him, Robert replied calmly. I'm protecting him from a mother who abandoned him in another state and embezzled $50,000 in support payments. Those payments were for household expenses, Mom protested. I used that money to take care of Kieran. Patricia Williams leaned toward the phone. Mrs. Chen, this is Robert's attorney. We have bank records showing you deposited those support payments into personal savings accounts while claiming poverty to manipulate your current husband. We also have evidence that you returned thousands of dollars worth of gifts intended for Kieran while accepting money from David under false pretenses. Mom's facade finally cracked completely. You can't prove any of that, she snarled, sounding nothing like the sweet mother she pretended to be in public. Actually, we can, Patricia continued. David has already provided a sworn statement about the payments he made to you and his growing suspicions about your financial deceptions. Apparently, your abandonment of Kieran was the final straw for him. This was news to me, and I looked at Robert with surprise. He nodded grimly. "David moved out yesterday," Robert explained. "When he learned what you did to Kieran and realized how you had been manipulating him financially, he ended the relationship. He's actually offered to testify on our behalf about your pattern of deception." The sound that came through the phone was somewhere between a sob and a scream of rage. Mom had lost everything: her son, her husband, her financial security, and now she was facing serious legal consequences for her actions. "This isn't over," Mom said, her voice ugly with spite. "Kieran is my son, and I'll fight this." "Please do," Robert said quietly. "I've been waiting 7 years for the chance to present all my evidence in open court. A custody battle will give me the perfect opportunity to document everything you've done." After Mom hung up, I sat in stunned silence, trying to process how quickly my entire world had changed. A week ago, I was sleeping on a fold-out couch in a converted office, being treated like an unwanted burden. Now, I was sitting in a beautiful home with people who had been fighting for me all along. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked Robert. "Since the day the divorce was finalized," he admitted. "I knew Sarah was unstable and manipulative, but I underestimated how far she would go to cut me out of your life. I started documenting everything, building a case, waiting for her to make a mistake big enough to justify taking action. Abandoning you in another state was that mistake," Patricia added. "It's criminal child endangerment, and it demonstrates clearly that she prioritizes her own interests over your safety and well-being." Over the following days, the legal consequences for Mom mounted rapidly. The criminal charges were filed first, resulting in a warrant being issued for her arrest on charges of child endangerment and fraud. The civil lawsuit followed, demanding restitution for the misappropriated support payments plus damages for emotional distress and lost relationship time. But the most devastating blow came when Ashley and Brandon, David's children, provided statements to the court about how Mom had treated me. Their testimony painted a picture of deliberate favoritism, emotional abuse, and systematic exclusion that supported the parental alienation charges. "Ashley actually felt guilty about how they treated you," Jennifer told me after reviewing their statements. "She told the court that she knew it was wrong but didn't speak up because she was afraid of losing the privileges your mother gave her." Even Brandon, despite being only 14, provided detailed testimony about specific incidents where Mom had punished me unfairly or given him and Ashley advantages that were denied to me. Their testimony was particularly powerful because they had no reason to lie in a way that would hurt Mom, who had been treating them well. Within 2 weeks of Mom's return from vacation, she had lost her husband, her home, her financial security, and legal custody of her son. The woman who had abandoned me at an airport to protect her new life was watching that life disintegrate as the consequences of her choices caught up with her. But more importantly, I was finally understanding what real family felt like, and I was about to learn that justice, while sometimes slow, can be incredibly thorough when the right people are fighting for you. The court proceedings that followed were swift and decisive, in a way that surprised everyone except Robert, who had spent 7 years preparing for exactly this moment. Judge Patricia Coleman, a veteran family court judge known for her no-nonsense approach to parental alienation cases, reviewed the evidence and reached conclusions that changed my life forever. This court finds clear and convincing evidence of systematic parental alienation, financial fraud, and child endangerment, Judge Coleman announced during the final hearing. The defendant's actions demonstrate a pattern of prioritizing personal gain over the welfare of her minor child. Mom was ordered to pay full restitution of $47,000 in misappropriated child support, plus an additional $23,000 in damages for emotional distress and lost relationship time. She was also sentenced to 2 years of probation for child endangerment and required to complete parenting classes, though the custody modification meant those classes would be purely academic since she had lost all parental rights. Robert was granted full legal and physical custody retroactively to the date of my abandonment, meaning that legally, I had never been required to return to Mom's house. The court also issued a restraining order, preventing Mom from contacting me directly, without court supervision until I turned 18. But the financial restitution, while substantial, represented only a fraction of what Mom had lost through her own choices. David not only ended their relationship but also demanded repayment of the thousands of dollars he had given her under false pretenses. When Mom couldn't produce that money, David filed his own civil lawsuit, adding another layer of financial consequences to her situation. Ashley and Brandon, the children she had favored over her own son, returned to living full-time with David, who had gained a new perspective on parental manipulation through witnessing Mom's treatment of me. They sent me a letter of apology through the court system, acknowledging that they had known her behavior was wrong but had been afraid to speak up. "We're sorry we didn't stand up for you," Ashley wrote in handwriting that looked much younger than her 16 years. "We knew Mom was being unfair, but we liked the attention and gifts she gave us. We understand now that real families don't work that way." Meanwhile, my life in San Diego was transforming in ways I never could have imagined. Robert enrolled me in a private school known for its strong academics and supportive environment, understanding that I needed time to heal from years of emotional manipulation. My grades, which had suffered under the chaos of Mom's house, began improving immediately when I had a stable home environment and people who prioritized my education. Emma became the sister I never knew I wanted, enthusiastic and loving without being overwhelming. She had been saving her allowance for months to buy me a big brother gift, and presented me with a beautiful watch engraved with "Welcome Home" and the date of my rescue from Orlando. "I always knew you would come live with us someday," Emma told me as we sat by the pool one evening, watching the California sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "Dad used to look sad on your birthday, and I would tell him that next year you'd be here to celebrate with us." Jennifer proved to be the mother figure I had needed all along, someone who cared about my well-being without trying to manipulate me for personal gain. She helped me process the emotional trauma of Mom's abandonment, while also encouraging me to build new relationships and pursue interests I had never been allowed to explore. "Your mother's actions say nothing about your worth as a person," Jennifer told me during one of our conversations about forgiveness and moving forward. "They only reveal her own limitations and poor choices." Robert threw himself into making up for lost time, attending every school event, helping with homework, and sharing his love of aviation by teaching me to fly. We spent weekends at the airport, where he patiently explained the principles of flight and let me take control of his training aircraft under his supervision. "Flying requires trust," Robert said during one of our lessons as we soared over the San Diego coastline. "Trust in your equipment, trust in your training, and trust in your ability to make good decisions. Those are all things that got damaged in your relationship with your mother, but they can be rebuilt." 2 years after my rescue from Orlando Airport, I was a completely different person. I had grown 4 inches, gained confidence and muscle from playing baseball on my school team, and developed the kind of easy relationships with friends that had been impossible when I was constantly stressed about home life. My grades had improved so dramatically that I was accepted to University of California, San Diego with a partial academic scholarship. Robert was proud but not surprised, having always believed in my potential even when I couldn't see it myself. The day before I left for college orientation, Mom made one final attempt to contact me. She had completed her probation and parenting classes and wrote me a letter that the court forwarded through Robert's attorney. The letter was filled with apologies and explanations, attempts to justify her choices and plead for a second chance at a relationship. Reading that letter, I felt something I hadn't expected: pity. Mom had lost everything that mattered, not through bad luck or circumstances beyond her control, but through her own selfish choices. She was working again as a nurse, living in a small apartment, and facing years of debt from the restitution and legal fees. Most importantly, she was alone, having alienated everyone who had ever cared about her. But I also felt something else: complete emotional freedom from her manipulation. The scared 15-year-old boy who had desperately wanted his mother's love had grown into a confident, 17-year-old young man who understood that real love doesn't abandon, manipulate, or deceive. I wrote back to Mom, not with anger or hatred, but with honest forgiveness that was more for my own peace of mind than for her benefit. "I forgive you for abandoning me," I wrote. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or pretending that what you did was acceptable. You chose money and status over your own son, and those choices have consequences that can't be undone. I have a real family now, people who have shown me what genuine love and support look like. I wish you well, but I don't need you in my life anymore." That letter represented my final closure with the woman who had given birth to me but had never truly been my mother in any meaningful sense. Today, as I prepare to graduate from college with a degree in aeronautical engineering, I understand that Mom's abandonment was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to discover the father who had been fighting for me all along and showed me what real family relationships look like. Emma is now 14 and still my biggest supporter, attending every baseball game and constantly bragging to her friends about her big brother in college. Jennifer has been more of a mother to me in 4 years than Sarah ever was in 15. And Robert has proven that real fathers don't abandon their children. They fight for them even when the odds seem impossible. I learned that sometimes the people who hurt us most give us the greatest gifts, not through their love but through their betrayal. Being abandoned taught me to value loyalty. Being lied to taught me to treasure honesty. Being manipulated taught me to recognize genuine care. Most importantly, I learned that family isn't defined by blood or biology, but by the people who choose to stand by you when life gets difficult. Real families don't abandon each other for money or convenience. They fight for each other, support each other's dreams, and create safe spaces where everyone can grow into their best selves. The scared kid who stood alone in Orlando Airport thought his world was ending. He had no idea that his real life was just beginning. What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about your family was a lie designed to manipulate you? Have you ever had to choose between loyalty to someone who hurt you and loyalty to yourself? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming betrayal and finding real family. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that sometimes losing everything leads to finding what truly matters. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by how others treat you, but by how you choose to respond when life tests your character. Sometimes the most painful experiences become the foundation for the most beautiful transformations.